Okay, so this week we're going to dive into a story that I'm sure you've seen the headlines about. It's
Yeah.
it's one of those stories that, it's just heartbreaking, and we really wanted to understand what happened and what it might mean for, um, safety in these kinds of places where we gather to, celebrate and enjoy ourselves. So we're looking at the reports out of CBS News about that awful fire at that nightclub in North Macedonia early Sunday morning.
Yeah, it's a terrible situation, at Club Pulse. The initial reports paint a really, really grim picture. A fire breaking out during a concert, early in the morning, 2:30 a.m., at least 59 dead, 155 injured. Just awful.
Really puts a pit in your stomach when you see those numbers, 59 lives just gone like that. So this happened in Kocani at this place, Club Pulse. It sounds like it had been around for a while, but it wasn't always a club. I guess it used to be a carpet warehouse, which makes you wonder, did that have anything to do with how bad it got? Would it have been different if it had been built, as a nightclub from the start?
Yeah, it's a question worth asking, for sure.
Hmm.
I mean, buildings that get repurposed like that can sometimes have, their own unique problems when it comes to fire safety. The original design and the codes that were in place when it was built as a warehouse might not have taken into account the added risks that come with a nightclub. You've got a lot more people packed in there. You've got potential fire hazards that might not have been a concern before. In this case, it sounds like initial thoughts are pointing to pyrotechnics, maybe part of the concert, and that could have set the roof alight, according to the interior minister. There's actually some pretty disturbing video going around too, showing the chaos inside, young people trying to escape through all the smoke while the band is up on stage and telling everyone to get out.
Man, I can't even imagine. You go out to have a good time, and then suddenly you're fighting for your life in a room full of smoke and
Yeah.
people panicking all around you. It's a nightmare. And as we said, the aftermath is just devastating. 59 confirmed dead, 39 of them identified so far, and another 155 injured.
It's just a massive tragedy. And you really see the human cost.
Yeah.
In a quote from one of the residents, a man named Dragi Stojanov, who lost his son Tom Masais in the fire, he said, "He was my only child. I don't need my life anymore." It's just heartbreaking.
It really is. It puts it all into perspective. And for North Macedonia, a country with a population under 2 million, this is being called the worst tragedy in recent memory. It's hard to imagine the impact something like this has on a nation like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the immediate response, it sounds like the injured were taken to hospitals in Kocani, but also to the capital in Skopje, a lot of them with serious burns, so they needed specialized care. And it seems like volunteer organizations jumped in right away to help out in those first crucial hours.
And it wasn't just people within North Macedonia, right? I mean, the article mentions help being offered from neighboring countries like Albania, Bulgaria, Greece, Serbia. It really does show that kind of regional solidarity when something like this happens.
Definitely. And the government's response seemed pretty quick, too. The health minister, Arben Tarvari, was obviously shaken when he said that they were throwing everything they had at this to try to save lives.
And the president, Gordana Zelenovska-Devkova, visited some of the injured, offering words of support. And the prime minister, Christian Mikoski, put out a statement online, talking about the nation's profound sorrow and how this is an irreplaceable loss. I can't imagine the pressure on them in a situation like this.
I bet. The article also talks about, the families gathering outside hospitals and city offices in Kocani, just desperate for any news about their loved ones. That waiting and not knowing must be agonizing.
Absolutely. A real collective trauma for the community. And of course, there's a full-blown investigation going on to figure out exactly what happened. The area was cordoned off right away. Evidence teams, including state prosecutors, are going through everything very carefully. We did hear from a state prosecutor, Jubko Kuchevsky, and he said they're questioning a number of people, but he didn't say much more about how far along the investigation is or what exactly caused the fire. And, it's still early.
Right. It's all about gathering the facts and preserving the scene so they can analyze everything properly. Officials from the Interior Ministry have also said they're going to look into the club's licensing and if it was meeting all the safety regulations. They're even talking about the government's moral responsibility to make sure anyone at fault is held accountable.
Yeah.
The article also mentions one arrest, although they haven't released any details about who that is or what their connection to the fire might be. But it does tell us that the investigation is active.
Sounds like it. So it seems like the initial shock and grief are starting to give way to those really important questions. How did this happen and who should be held responsible for making sure this place was safe? And it's not just in North Macedonia, right? I mean, there's been a big international response to this.
Oh, definitely. Condolences have been coming in from all over, not just those neighboring countries, but leaders and organizations across Europe. The EU's foreign policy chief, Kocani, offered condolences and said the European Union stands with North Macedonia, especially at Knest, considering they're a candidate to join the EU. You can see the bonds there within the European community.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the EU. The article specifically mentions condolences from Albania's Prime Minister Edi Rama, the European Commissioner for Enlargement Marta Kos, and even Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Zelensky's message was particularly striking, considering what they're going through right now. He said, "I wish those who are injured a speedy recovery. Ukraine mourns alongside our North Macedonian friends on this sad day. Even in the midst of their own tragedy, they're reaching out in solidarity. It's a reminder that grief and empathy are universal."
One thing that really hit me in this report was the fact that this isn't the first time pyrotechnics have been linked to a deadly nightclub fire. They brought up the collective club fire in Bucharest, Romania, back in 2015, which killed 64 people. That's a chilling parallel, and it makes you wonder if we've learned enough from these kinds of tragedies.
Yeah, that comparison to the collective fire is really significant. The fact that we're looking at a similar potential cause here, pyrotechnics in a closed space, suggests there might be a recurring issue in the entertainment industry. It makes you question if safety protocols and how they're enforced are strong enough and consistent across different venues in different parts of the world. Maybe we're not doing enough to apply the lessons we should have learned from past disasters to prevent these things from happening again.
Okay, so let's shift gears for a minute and talk about you, the listener. What are the key takeaways from this deep dive into this horrible event in North Macedonia?
Well, first, it shows just how dangerous fire can be in an enclosed space like a nightclub. What might start as something small and seemingly under control, like using pyrotechnics, can turn into a massive inferno in the blink of an eye, and there's very little time to escape, especially when you got a lot of people crammed in there.
Absolutely. It really highlights how crucial it is to have strict safety regulations for public venues and make sure those regulations are being enforced. Things like clearly marked and easily accessible fire exits, having fire suppression systems that actually work, and strict rules about things like pyrotechnics. These aren't just boxes to tick off, they're absolutely essential in preventing tragedies like this. When those systems fail or aren't good enough, the consequences can be absolutely devastating.
Another takeaway, and it's a bit of a silver lining in all this, is that you see the best of humanity coming out in times of crisis. The way local resources were mobilized so quickly, the selflessness of the volunteer organizations, the support from neighboring countries, and the international community as a whole. It shows our shared sense of humanity and willingness to help those in need during times of immense suffering. It's a reminder that we're all connected in a way.
And lastly, beyond the numbers and the immediate response, we need to remember the impact this is going to have on the families, the friends, the entire community in Kocani. Losing so many young lives so suddenly and so violently leaves a wound that's going to take a very long time to heal. This event is going to leave a lasting mark.
Definitely. Moments like this really test the fabric of a community. There's the immediate grief, but there will also be long-term psychological and emotional impacts. It forces a community to reflect and ask tough questions about safety, about responsibility, about how to prevent something like this from happening again.
This deep dive into this terrible nightclub fire in North Macedonia leaves us with a heavy heart. It's a stark and painful reminder that life is fragile and that safety should always be a top priority in any space where people come together.
So this tragedy poses a critical question for you to think about. What systemic issues might be contributing to these devastating events at entertainment venues? And what concrete, proactive steps can we take both locally and globally to prevent them from happening again? It makes us think about how to strike that balance between celebrating and making sure everyone is safe and well.